Welcome to the Psychedelic Mom Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Carlin. Thank you for being here today and for following the Psychedelic Mom Podcast on this journey as we explore earth medicines and psychedelics, the different modalities that support healing, and as we're diving into more and more topics, the intersectionality of science and spirituality and AI and psychedelics. We're also diving into deeper existential questions and deeper stages of self-realization and the difference between awakening experiences with psychedelics and true self-realization and enlightenment. But we're also talking about a lot of personal journeys on this podcast and people that are using earth medicines for healing biologically, psychologically. And so welcome here today. Also a reminder that my show is not an endorsement of use of psychedelics and earth medicines, and I don't give medical recommendations or advice. This program is for entertainment use only. But today I am bringing you a doctor, Dr. Gabrielle Pelicci, and she is here today to talk about her new book. Dr. Gabby is the head of provider relations at the Third Wave, which is a trusted research-based psychedelic platform for education and community. Dr. Gabby completed her doctoral work in transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies with a dissertation on women healers. I love that. She studied plant medicines with indigenous healers in New Mexico and Guatemala, and she has been a university professor of integrative and holistic medicine since 2007. And she is here today to talk about her personal journey and her new book, All of This Healing is Killing Me. And I think this title is going to resonate with many people in the West. When my producer heard it, she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm sitting with it." So welcome, Gabrielle. How are you today?
First, I want to say thanks so much for having me here. I'm so glad that we connected and that we're part of a community of women who are working in psychedelics and celebrating psychedelics and sharing this information because I think it's super valuable. And my journey has been a very long one. I've been doing healing work both personally and professionally for, more than 2 decades. And it has led me on a very winding path through yoga and meditation and body work and energy healing and all the different holistic therapies. And I feel like I sort of graduated into plant medicine. And you and I talked about this when we connected just recently, and then fell in love so deeply with the plant medicine and the psychedelic community that start working in that community full time, which is where I am now. So I published this book, All This Healing is Killing Me, which had been a labor of love for the last 15 years. And I had been trying to get it out and trying to get it out. And I think plants were a large part of that birthing process because I had almost gotten it out and then I was not quite there, but I feel like the plants really supported me. I was microdosing during the last 18 months of revisions and publication and did some ceremonies with psilocybin and ayahuasca and peyote. And I feel like that's some of the energy that you get when you receive the book, as well as a lot of information about different therapeutic modalities and my own personal healing journey. So
yes, it's nice to join forces as women in the psychedelic space and yes, share wisdom and story. So why don't we start with what brought you to write this book, All of This Healing is Killing Me? I read that there was definitely a catalyst for the beginning of your healing journey. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that catalyst was?
yeah. The catalyst for my journey was that my mom passed away when I was 21, and that's the inciting incident in the book. That's the opening chapter of the book. And from there, you kind of see how my path unfolds and how I develop a strong passion for healing modalities and meet a lot of different mentors. And I did my dissertation research in 2004, 5, 6 about women healers. I interviewed women healers from all different cultures and traditions around the world, from Asia and Africa and South America and indigenous traditions. But it was very much at a distance. It was through like a Western academic lens. So I was asking them very academic questions, collecting the narrative, looking for themes, and themes emerged. One of the themes that emerged in my dissertation research was that nature is a teacher and a tool for healing. But at the time, even then, I was like, this is my academic finding because I'm an academic. Plants have wisdom, check, like it was like not in my body or it was just like, this is something that's true in the world. And it wasn't until I don't know, 15 years later that I was ingesting the plants. I was living with a medicine woman in New Mexico, working with peyote, living with a medicine woman in Guatemala, working with all the herbs and permaculture and psilocybin, that I was like, oh, plants are a teacher and tool for healing. Like it just was a big gap in terms of my experience and what I had learned when I did my research.
I love that. Nature is a healer. That's great. I love that you did your dissertation on women healers around the world and earth medicines, and this acknowledgement that there is such a difference from learning from afar in a Western academic setting versus putting your feet in the ground and meeting these healers and doing earth medicines and having your own deep experiences with them. So I'm curious, what did you learn from a distance, kind of in the academic setting, about these healers and these medicines that eventually you learned through working with these plants yourself?
Yeah, I was going through an evolution of paradigm shifts. I grew up in deeply embedded in the Western paradigm. My father was a psychiatrist and a neurologist. I went to Catholic school, God forbid, for 12 years. So I was deeply ingrained in one paradigm. And then through the course of my mother's death and finding all the Eastern modalities and exploring all of that, I went through a shift to expanding my view of medicine to include not only Western medicine, but all the different holistic modalities, but still holistic modalities that were evidence-based and holistic modalities that were empirical, right? Like still holistic modalities. Yeah. So I had that expansion. That was the second expansion. And then that I continued to evolve in my relationship to wellness and what wellness was and how food affects the body and mindset and thoughts and neuroimmunology and all of the things, right? And I did that for a long time. And then I feel like this last shift really happened during the pandemic because all of the Western wellness modalities shut down. Like there was no more yoga studios, no more spas, no more breathwork classes, like all the things that were my tools, my techniques, my places, my community, my sangha, all of that was all closed, which is a really weird experience for me because it was the first time in my lifetime that I wasn't going to a daily thing with community and doing the Western wellness version of healing. And so I just started walking and I was walking for hours and days and that went into weeks, into months. And then I got invited to build an earth ship. So I went on to Puerto Rico and I started building earth ships. And then that led to permaculture. I signed up for a permaculture course and then an herbalism course. One thing just led to another. And it was to fulfill my own need for community, for that ongoing healing, for being connected to others and the planet. And that's when the plants and I really communed. And that's when this other paradigm really opened up, which is for me the next evolution of my perception and experience of what medicine and healing actually is. So it's been something that's been evolving, which I think that it should. I think our perspectives and our paradigm should continue to unfold and evolve as we integrate new experiences and new information. I think that's like a really healthy way to grow, you know.
It's so fascinating. this way that you grew up, your father being a psychologist or psychiatrist, and Catholic school, and going through all these different modalities. I'm curious, prior to earth medicines, and your early trauma, what would you say that the greatest impact that once you used earth medicines had on the deeper layers of healing, your early trauma and early conditioning? What was that impact, and what did that entail?
The thing that I wasn't totally cognizant of until I really started working with the plants is the sentience of the plants. So, all the modalities up until that point, if there was a human practitioner involved, then there was a sentience involved. Or if we were calling on guides or something, there was a bit of a sentience there. But a lot of it was very mm, non-sentient. I don't know. There's not a really good word for it. Separated somehow. It was like, it was still in a context of, clinical, mechanical mindset. With the plants, what I felt like was happening with the plants was that I was ingesting them and they were working through me. So it's a different relationship to the trauma. It's a different relationship to injury or things that I'm holding when I'm working with them in that way, because the mechanical paradigm says I'm broken, I need to be fixed. There's something here that needs to be, cut out or cured or, you know, fixed in some way. That's the mindset. And then when you work with the plants, and I think this is something that we're not communicating well, it's not that the plants become another surgical instrument or medication, which is how a lot of it is being framed. That's not my experience of it all. My experience is that these plants are coming in and they're reframing the context. They're showing me generational trauma. They're showing me the value of the emotional experience that I'm having, how I'm processing things that are meant to be processed, how there's energy within those experiences that can be alchemized into other creative expressions, like the book that I wrote, All This Healing's Killing Me. Like they shift my perspective, they rewire me and create a resilience within me so that I can look at these things that happen to me and not identify with them as who I am. Like, it's something that happened to me, but it's not who I am, and I'm stronger than the things that happened to me. And there's such a non-linear experience, and I don't think we can neatly put it in the box of medicine in the way that we typically understand medicine, healthcare, treatment that we're used to, you know.
I totally agree. It is so hard to contextualize. Oh my gosh, what is it like to purge? What is it like to suddenly surrender to the music and the medicine? It's very hard to talk about the different layers, and you're doing a really good job of talking about how it's not linear and how the medicine brings you into your history. It's not and what your experience in life and what your trauma is doesn't define you. It's interesting that even thinking that earth medicines brought about this book in a way, that this is a way to heal, and that there's something energetic going on in all these layers. So thank you for sharing that. And because it is contextually hard for someone who hasn't done an earth medicine, I think it is hard to understand what a relationship with a plant wisdom might feel like and be like, and these layers and layers that you're speaking to.
What the medicine gave insight to was so vast and meaningful. in one ayahuasca ceremony, I mean, they just showed me all of the spiritual support that I've had for my whole lifetime, and all the ways I've been protected, and all the ways that I've been loved. And I experienced so much joy, and I received all kinds of messages in that ceremony around not needing to take care of other people, because I'm like an over, take care of, please people, help people, fix things person. And the universe showed me how it was already taking care of everyone, and I didn't need to play that role. And just all of this wisdom that was direct source wisdom, this gnosis, this wisdom that has been outsourced, like our spiritual leaders or our gurus or whatever. It was like a reconnection of direct wisdom that was telling me different things about myself. In another ceremony, I was, decomposed into the earth, and I became dirt and glowworms. And then I was, remanifested as human. And I really felt how literal it is that we are the earth, like not conceptually, but like literally that's what we are. And that if we're thinking of ourselves as anything but earth, then we are misidentifying ourselves, because like we and the earth are literally the same substance, the same molecule. So there's so many different kinds of experiences of new information and wisdom and connectedness and attunement and alignment, so many different ways that made me feel like the universe really was an ally. It was an ally in my journey, that these plants are there as a teacher, a healer, a resource, a support system. I feel a real friendliness. I like when I go outside now for a walk or something, I literally greet everything around me. I greet the plants and the flowers and the butterflies. And this morning, when I took out the garbage, there was like a worm eating a leaf. Like I greet them. It really feels like there's a Mary Oliver poem about the family of things. I don't know if you know that poem, but like that sense of belonging, it restored my sense of belonging, which all of these things I think are symptoms that we all share. I think we have an epidemic of loneliness, we have an epidemic of mental health, we have an epidemic of physical health, we have all these epidemics of addiction. And I think the restoration is not just about medication. I think the restoration is about restoring that sense of belonging and connectedness. And you need less medicine when when you have the restoration. So
Yeah, it's so amazing, this way that you were shown that earth medicines were your allies, they were your teachers. Um, and this direct gnosis, this direct wisdom that I don't know, I haven't really experienced in any other modality at all. That we used to have to go through someone else, a guru, a priest, somebody to get our wisdom and knowledge. And here you speak of the direct wisdom and friendship, and the idea that the universe is our ally, and we are the dirt. I even like that phrase that if we're not seeing ourselves as the dirt, then we are misidentifying ourselves. Oh my gosh. And yes, I love this poem of Mary Oliver's. I have it here. It's actually called Wild Geese. All right, ready? Little Mary Oliver, my favorite poet, for you. In this desire of belonging and healing, it's so resonant. You don't have to be good. You don't have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I'll tell you about mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the blue, clean blue air, are headed home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So, there is the Mary Oliver poem that offers this idea of great belonging and that we are a family of things, that we are the dirt. So, yeah, that's so incredibly beautiful. We as Westerners have such a need for belonging. And as you said, one of the things you and I talked about before we spoke is this, how in the Western model, everything's kind of in this box. And I'm curious about any somatic experiences that you had. We talk about you were talking about the destructive process, and your book basically says all of this healing work is killing me. So I'm curious about this destructive process. And you spoke about growing up Catholic and the conditioning that you had. I'm curious, what was your deconstruction process like?
I love how when you and I had our quick chat before we jumped into this interview and we talked about all of the healing that you do, you said to me, like, there's no one waiting at the end, like with a trophy for you or diploma or something, right? You're like, there's no one like, yay! It's such an invisible battle, and you have to celebrate yourself because most people don't know what you're going through. And, most people are going through something. For me, yes, dark night of the soul, the shadow work is a bitch. I'm sorry. Like, shadow work is a bitch. So, like, what a nightmare. What a nightmare. Like,
Yes, we were talking about that. It was resonant to me because when you go through this process of healing and you are whatever it is, whatever plant you have the privilege to take, you go through this journey and you are purging. You may have lost hours and hours of sleep. You may have seen incredibly difficult things. And this isn't just a one-time deal. For me, it wasn't anyway. So you're in this deep process with yourself. You're hitting the hardest emotions that you have ever felt, ones that you've spent your entire life hiding from yourself. And there's no one at the end. There's no trophy. You come out of a journey and you have gone through your lineage of both light and darkness. There's no one at the end saying like, you did it. So yeah, it is a wild ride, in particular for Westerners that aren't used to that. I just heard recently about a culture that every month has a grief ceremony, and it is looked down upon if you don't show up, because basically they believe that together as a community, that grief needs to be moved through, and that we experience grief all the time. We may shut it down, and they dance their grief out, and they go into trance and dance to move that grief, because they also believe that grief, if not moved through, ends up being projected out into the world. So yeah, wild that no one shows up with the gift at the end, the big prize. So why don't we start there? How would you describe shadow?
so for those people who don't know what shadow work is, I'm just going to start there. Shadow work is all the shit that you don't like about yourself, that you don't want anybody to know, that you deny, repress, hide, disguise, and that you build up a persona that you present to the world. And some people, the gap is further, and some people, it's closer. For me, I would say the gap was pretty wide, and it was getting closer and closer over time as I was doing different kinds of therapeutic work. If you saw me as a kid, I grew up in a home with domestic violence, mental illness, addiction. But if you saw me when I was a kid, I like got a modeling contract when I was 16. I was a beauty queen. I was a straight A student. I got into all my top choice colleges. Then I went on to get a PhD. It would be easy for you to perceive me as somebody who was, you know, very successful, very happy, had her shit together. And right, my shadow, my shadow was just this like, it was just this like pit of snakes and, you know, like, I don't know. I just, in my mind, just see this kind of like goopy pit of um, creepy crawly things. So I I had kind of like dipped a toe in it from time to time and like pulled out a piece, like little by little, like, okay, let's deal with my perfectionism. Let's deal with my whatever. But I hadn't like really gone into it. So when you get to the final chapter of my book, it's where I do this therapeutic workshop that I go to all the shadow things, like all the things. I confront it. It's a very confrontational experience. And I'm left at the other side of it with like, I'm not who I think that I am. And most of the people that know me don't actually know who I am. And I'm not being seen and I'm not acknowledging myself. And that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I needed to tell myself my own story with raw vulnerability, accountability, transparency, honesty. And one of the hardest things when you do that is the mistakes that you've made and forgiving yourself for all the stupid stuff that you did in this mode of self-protection and presenting a good face to the world. There was like a lot of self-forgiveness that had to happen. And I think if you don't do that, you end up with a lot of resentment and a lot of regrets. And I honestly believe one of the statements I say in the book is you're only as sick as your secrets. I really believe that not confronting the shadow, yeah, and the secrets and the shame, I really do think it just festers like a festering wound into different kinds of physical and mental illness. So I think it's critical. I think that we have a culture that does not want you to talk about your shadow or deal with your shadow. I think culturally we have a huge shadow. And like in our culture, we have the shadow of like racism and sexism. And I mean, collectively.
You know, it's so amazing. And I know this is true for both men and women. There may be even more, maybe, or maybe I'm just a woman, so I can identify with it. But this idea that you grew up with domestic violence and mental health issues in the family, and then you're a beauty queen putting on a big smile and then got a modeling job and a PhD, the ways in which in Western culture we suppress and can't show the wounds. We have to hide them and show up as like pleasing and taking care of others and beautiful. I love this idea of like tipping your toe in the shadow. Let me put a little toe in there, and these creepy crawlers of snakes that are just ready there to invite you to be there. But it's just an interesting conversation as women. I have a friend who uses the word becoming. She has a program called Becoming, and it's kind of an old word that is being kind of resurfaced, this idea of what is becoming. And it's interesting as you talk about this journey of becoming and closing the gap of your authenticity and truth and becoming closer to the true identification of who we are, which is nature and these beautiful beings. And you know, this becoming process and unbecoming what we were told what was like unbecoming. You know, it's just like it's mind-blowing. I know both of us are having a hard time even grasping what it could have been like prior to, even in older generations, what would have been even more suppressed and not allowed in the conversation of women. When you did release the book, what was the feedback that you got from other women that read the book? Were they excited about it?
Yeah, I had some women who read the book say to me, "Why can't we be like this together. Like one of my friends read the book. She's a friend that I've just had for about a year, and she read the book. She's like, I'm really mad at you. And I was like, why are you mad at me? She goes, why didn't you tell me any of the stuff that was in this book? And I was like, I don't know. Like, because when we hang out, we like go get some food, or we like, I'm not gonna be like, by the way, here's all the shadow work that I did. So she was like, I feel like this version of you in the book is like really you. Like this is really you. And I was like, yeah, and this is really me too. I'm fun and I'm playful and I'm this is also me. And she's like, I'm just really glad I know this version of you. She's like, why don't we do this together as people, like not just women, but just as people? Why don't we do this? Like what you've written at, why don't we just show up and like in our community, in our gatherings, in our conversations, release and share and express the innermost workings, thoughts, feelings, aspects of our authenticity. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, it's better than it used to be. Like, it's a lot better than it used to be. Because I mean, you talk about not becoming of a woman. Yeah. I mean, it, yeah, I like it is mind blowing.
Yes, you're right. I mean, it's definitely better. And I'm so glad that it was greeted like, why don't we do this? Why don't we show up? Because yes, look at you. You're not only beautiful, but you have this bubbly personality. Even when you're talking about the creepy crawlers, snakes in the pit, and dipping your toe in and your trauma, you are very lighthearted in it all. And I like the fact that you said like this is me and this is me. But it is nice, and I'm sure you're finding this in the community within the psychedelic space of true sisterhood, where we can show up as we are. You know, I have a colleague that I work with, and we're actually practicing at times, just like really showing up with what is true, kind of like, you know, what's going on for you today, and getting to the like sometimes the really gnarly, gritty stuff. And you know, doesn't mean you can't have laughter with it all, but I think that this deeper sense that we're one of the things that you talked about early on was that this journey really started with a desire for deeper connection, and then COVID shut your traditional Western ways of connecting with others, the yoga class and the places that you got to go. When it shuts it all down, where does the Western connection go when we're not in those spaces? And it is refreshing that these deeper conversations are happening, and that I think once we come to the place of the deeper layers of peeling back so many layers of ourselves, so much of our, you know, protective masks that we wear, the more we put those down and just show up as we are, we invite others to do the same, in particular as, you know, as women. What would your practical advice, just to switch gears here, just to switch gears here a little bit, what would your practical advice be for someone who reads your book and wants to take earth medicines? And you have, I mean, you have obviously have so much wisdom with your background in integrative health, so it's not just earth medicines, but what would your suggestion and practical advice be for someone who reads your book?
A couple of things. One is don't do healing work all the time. Like stop, like do healing work, okay? But don't be Western about it. We have a Western mentality of excess and just, you know, we think we can get it all out and like, you know, I'm just going to do another ayahuasca and another ayahuasca and another ayahuasca. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to evolve over time. You're going to evolve over years and decades. And I really think it's healthy to compartmentalize. Have your weekly therapy session, have your weekly massage, have your retreat that you go on once or twice a year. Like, have your time, have your journaling in the morning for 30 minutes or your breath work or whatever you're doing. And then segment time for joy. It's just for joy. Like for me, it's like riding my bike or visiting with friends, like have your joy time and don't be in this. And you got to know how to change states because they're different states. And Tony Robbins does this really well. I've been to a bunch of his things. And he talks about getting into a peak state. You got to change your state, like healing. And when you're reading my book, you can kind of feel that energy of the healing process. And people have come out of my book kind of speechless, being like, whoa, whoa, like the energy in your book is intense. And I'm like, great, now put the book down, go take a cold shower, go for a walk, shake off the energy, right? And like get yourself in a different state. I think we need to manage that better. And the second thing I would say is I think we don't give people enough credit, including ourselves, for how hard this work actually is. It's profound warrior work to do really genuine healing work, especially shadow work and trauma work. It's really, really hard work. So for all the men and women out there that are doing this work, my utmost respect goes out to you, and you should feel a lot of respect and pride in yourself for doing this kind of work because it is really hard. I think that's not a conversation that we have enough either. So yeah, be kind to yourself.
I love the idea that your book has this energy to it, so much so that you're advising take a cold shower. And also that to take a break, that this work is intense, to maybe not stay at it and at it and at it, to take a break. And I totally agree. It is profound warrior work that words cannot really express. It's when people are really going into really difficult stuff, whether that is trauma from racism, sexual trauma, trauma from the loss of a parent as a little child, it really is. It's because I think the thing that's like so nitty gritty about it, it's if these things happened to us as adults, maybe those emotions wouldn't be as intense, but when you are in this profound warrior work, what you're really doing is you're reclaiming the child that felt it. It's like the intensity of how a child would feel these deep wounds. So, yes, it is incredibly brave and profound work. Because this is, such incredible work, community is so needed. What would your recommendations be, or for somebody on this path? Did you find community on this path, and did you find that essential?
Like 1,000 different communities. I, I think I've been collecting communities along my journey. I mentioned growing up in the Catholic Church, and it wasn't ideal. It's not my paradigm now, but at the time, being in youth groups and, being in choir and things like that, it was nourishing for my spirit at that time. And then graduating into yoga teacher trainings, having my yogi community that's scattered all over the world, and then going into academics and having my academic community and gathering at conferences and going through grad school, that became a community for me. And then graduating from that and now being in the psychedelic community, you and I met in the women's psychedelic community, right? That's a community. And whenever I go to events, I went to South by Southwest, I went to Cannadelic and Wonderland, I'm gathering with women at those events, and we're going off for, rooftop drinks or to have a conversation over here or there. So I think I collect communities. I'm a part of a lot of communities. I'm building a community at Third Wave. I work for Third Wave, which is a psychedelics education company. I'm building our community there, which is providers and enthusiasts about psychedelics and the coaches that come through our coaching training program. So I think it's critical. I think we've created a sense of community in the West that's very transactional. It's like, if you pay this fee, you can go to this thing and you can be friends with these people. And that's not my version of community. And I think part of this restoration process and part of the thing that the plants are teaching us is like what real community actually is. And I think that's going to be a relearning for all of us collectively. And I don't think it's transactional. I think it's more like the mycelial network of sharing energies and resources and taking care of each other and supporting each other. And I think it's something that we're having to relearn, and that Indigenous communities can teach us, because they haven't lost that like we have.
It's so refreshing to hear all the ways in which you are building community, in particular in the space of psychedelic women. And it's inspiring to others on this path. And, you know, you were speaking to the Western way of connecting that can be very transactional. I don't even think we realize it. Actually, it was something that I learned after Earth Medicines, working with, doing my integration process with the medicine woman I was working with. She highlighted at times how transactional some of my relationships were. And it was kind of a surprise. It's kind of like when you're swimming in that water, you don't even notice it. And then when someone highlights it, you have to actually go back and change those relational patterns and change a whole way of being, really, and relating in the world. Wow. Just that alone is so profound for medicine, what medicine teaches us, and this idea of being much more like the mycelium web. So you did so many travels, and you were, you know, doing the permaculture and working with different indigenous people. What would you say that the indigenous wisdom that you brought back?
It's a good question. I've done quite a bit of travel, maybe about 50 countries so far. The places that I worked and studied indigenous medicine were in Guatemala and New Mexico, which I consider another country, even though it's in the US. And with my teacher in New Mexico, we worked with the native church. We worked with peyote. We were harvesting it and preparing it for ceremonies, and I was microdosing on it. And her wisdom was so vast. It was so vast. The way that she could draw on indigenous wisdom, Vedic science, astrological things, biological things, palm reading. I mean, she could just grab anything at any given moment and whip it into some recipe. Like it was astonishing. It was also one of the findings in my dissertation research was that women healers, master women healers, they use an integrative approach. Like sometimes it's crystal rocks, and sometimes it's cabbage, and sometimes it's acupuncture needles, and sometimes it's feathers, eagle feathers, and sometimes it's peyote. And like that was also one of the findings, is that there are so many things available to us, and a master knows how to weave them together in the same way that a master chef knows just the exact amount of every single ingredient to make the perfect dish, right? That's really kind of the skill of the master healer. And so that was astonishing to watch. And then when I was doing the work in Guatemala through the herbalism and permaculture, I actually lived on 10 different farms, and I did harvesting, and I gathered all kinds of different plants, and I was doing CSA boxes. I was doing beekeeping, working with honey, working with bees. That was wow, wow, wow. I mean, I went for days of just eating whatever I pulled out of the ground for like days. Like if I pulled it out of the ground, if I ate it, if I didn't pull it out of the ground, like so that that experience of really only just taking in whatever was grown by me, harvested by me, uh, and provided by the earth, it again went back to this idea of transactional food versus non-transactional food. I think we're enculturated into a system where we think all of the food lives in the grocery store and you buy it with money. That's not true. Like, and it took me like 40 something years before I was like, food doesn't come from a grocery store. Like, cause I would spend the whole day just eating carrots and green beans and tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce and like berries, whatever I was picking. And I was like, food comes from the earth. And again, you can have an intellect, you can conceptualize this, but until you spend a month only eating what you pick out of the ground, it's really not your knowing. It's really not your experience, you know?
Wow, I am like bowing to you. And if there is ever something catastrophic, I am coming to you. I cannot believe that you had the opportunity to live in a way that you are that close to Mother Earth, just pulling out what she has to offer you in that day and living that way. I can't imagine that level of balance and the beekeeper in you and the permaculturist and you know it must have been such a profound experience. Again, it's like I have no experience of that, so I can't even imagine it. Probably similar to someone who's thinking of, what it might be like to ingest ayahuasca. Like, what would that actually be like? That is so wild. I'm curious for you what it was like to come home. There had to have been a huge transition after coming out of this lifestyle. What was that like?
Of course. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And now I feel like there are two Gabbies inside of me. I feel like there is the Gabby that can be on the podcast and that can live in an apartment. I bought a new toaster this week. Like I feel like there's this version of me. And then I feel like you could also drop me off with pretty much nothing but the clothes on my back on a farm, and I would be fine. I could build something, I could harvest something, I could, I don't want to say survive because it's not survive. I could live in community with nature. I feel like that lives within me, and I'm aware of that all the time. And I'm much more attracted to spending much more time outside than inside. And a lot of my lifestyle habits have changed. I only buy secondhand clothes. And I used to be like more bougie, like, I don't want secondhand clothes. But like, now I only buy secondhand clothes and it feels really good to me. I think you and I had talked about this a little bit in our previous call as well. You can't do everything. You can't be an advocate for recycling and an advocate for thrifting and an advocate for organic food and you can't be an advocate. There's too many things to advocate for.
Yes, we were talking about this, that you can't do everything. You can't take on every issue. And it's a delicate balance. I think that's what we were talking about as Western women, that it is a delicate balance between like two things. One is, if you've been on this path or you've been on it yourself and you've had major things that you've had to heal, or you've held somebody else's hand, a sister's hand on this journey, that one thing that you learn in the psychedelic earth medicine space is that in some ways privilege and socioeconomic background and color have nothing to do with trauma, in the sense that like it doesn't preclude anybody. Sexual trauma is one of the biggest traumas on the planet, and it has no barriers. And neither does death and loss of a parent, and neither does violence. And I'm not saying that to diminish any group that actually experiences larger percentages of trauma. But there is this delicate balance of, being a white woman in this space, having privilege, even having the privilege to heal, having the privilege to experience these medicines, and knowing that with that balance comes incredible responsibility. And how do we do that? How do we walk that delicate balance? I think we're still in the process of figuring that out. One of the podcasts that I just did and just got released was with Blessings of the Forest, who is trying to bridge that gap between the Western world and their desire for ibogaine, and how that will impact the Gabonese and the Iboga in Gabon, Africa. And how do we do that? How do we amplify those voices? And how do we do what we can in this space? It is a very delicate balance.
And we have to figure it out. We're not going back to just eating out of the ground. Like, unless there's some catastrophic event, which hopefully there's not, Like, we're not giving up our phones and our cars and our planes and our computer. We're just not. We have to figure out a middle way. We have to figure out a way how to live in harmony with plant medicine and modern technology. And there's a certain way you have to be as a Westerner. It's just a reality. And there's, like you said, a massive privilege that comes with that. And when I'm on panels with other Indigenous people, I say, I'm so privileged to be on this panel. I can't speak for Indigenous people. I hope I'm a bridge. I hope I'm bringing information from Indigenous people to the West and from the West to them. Like, I hope I'm a bridge, and I hope that we can have conversations about moving forward in a way that integrates everything that we have available to us.
It's such an important conversation, and I hope to always be part of that conversation. You and I were talking about, the ways in which the psychedelic renaissance is going, and even to call it psychedelic renaissance, people don't even like that term. And how do we do this in a way that we all voices have equality at the table? And how do we even following what's going on legalizing these medicines. Some of the indigenous would hope in the United States for just decriminalization, and what's happening with peyote, with the legalization of mescaline in Colorado and the legalization of ibogaine. What will happen? These are such critical conversations. And as certain states begin to look at the legalization in Colorado and Oregon, what will that look like? I heard from one of the interviews that I did with Ana Medina and Andrea Valeska that outside money came in to try to move forward legalization in another state. When we have these crossing of boundaries and lines, it's so important that this earth medicine space doesn't go the way of all Western model things, big pharma, big government, big tech, big money. It's a delicate path, and certainly hope to be the, again, it's like we only have the consciousness that we have, but always open for those open dialogues in this space. And like you, hope to be a bridge the best that I can be.
Yeah. It's a really difficult, it's a really difficult path, and I think it's going to require a lot of thoughtfulness and listening, because there's so many people that came before us that can inform the conversation. And at the same time, we're not going to stop the biotech. The biotech has a lot of money and a lot of power, and we're not going to stop it. And one of the conversations I had with an amazing woman, actually, who's running a biotech company, she said to me, because she came from plant medicine and transitioned to biotech, she said to me, I've been working on the border between Mexico and the US with refugees for years. She's like, I've been a humanitarian. I've been doing refugee work for years. She's like, I started doing the plant medicine. I fell in love with the plant medicine. I'm doing the biotech now because she said, there's not enough plant medicine in the world to heal everybody that needs to heal. We need to have a way to mass produce and distribute these medicines so that as many people as possible can have access to it. And that resonated with me. Like, I don't want to be like, yeah, but yeah, like there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's not enough peyote to go around. Like, there's just not. So if we don't have the biotech, we may not have the scale that we need. But to your point about community, there's set and setting, there's the therapeutic context, there's all of the other work that we can do to continue to make it sacred. I think one of the things that you're saying is we don't want to lose the sacredness of the process, right? In when we add the science, we want to somehow keep the science and the sacred as we move forward. So I think that that's possible. I think it requires thoughtfulness and attention, but I think it's possible.
So, who is this book intended for, and what is your mission with the book?
You. The listeners, it's intended for if you read the title, All This Healing is Killing Me, and you go, oh, then the book is for you. It doesn't matter, men, women. I'm getting emails and phone calls and messages from men and women. It doesn't matter your age. It's resonating with people who are 30 and people who are 70. One of my good friends, the breathwork instructor, he's in his 70s. It resonated with him. So if you're someone on a healing path and the title speaks to you, then there's something valuable in the book for you. And the mission of the book always from the beginning has been to be a catalyst for other people to explore their own story, because I believe that writing is medicine. It has been medicine for me. And I believe that when people write their story and they share their story, it doesn't have to be published in a book, but when they write their story and share their story, even if it's with a partner or a local, community, I do think that it's how we heal. And I think it's part of this light that you described shining into these spaces that have been dark for a very long time. And so I really do want the book to be a catalyst for people to be writing and sharing their own experiences.
So, where are you now on your journey?
Well, I work for Third Wave, which is like a super awesome company. And I'm writing another book, which is all about the plants because the plants have some messages that they want to share. So I'm writing another book. And yeah, I'm just having fun celebrating this project and talking with people like you and connecting with readers. It's just been an overwhelmingly positive and exciting and heartwarming experience.
Oh, I love that you're writing a book on the plants and going to bring more wisdom from the plants to us. If you had to say, from your experience with earth medicines and psychedelics, what have been the most impactful earth medicines for you?
Yeah, I would say the three plants that are my strongest allies are peyote, psilocybin, and ayahuasca. They're my strongest allies, and they inform me and commune with me in different ways. And they have different energies and different messages. But the combination of them for me was really beautiful and meaningful. And so I'll be writing a lot about those experiences.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper here. If I said to you, what did ayahuasca teach you in a word, what would it be?
Joy,
Mm. And what about peyote?
magic,
What about psilocybin?
love,
And on that same thread, if I said to you, what is the spirit of ayahuasca like? What would you say?
grandmother, kick your ass quality.
And for someone who has never had the chance to take peyote, what would you say the spirit of peyote is?
Peyote is like a dancing desert, um, just a dancing desert spirit.
And how about the spirit of psilocybin?
Oh, psilocybin's like old school, like old school, yeah, just like very, very ancient cosmic knowledge in a being. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, does that resonate with me? Let's see. Yes, yes, it does. I would say psilocybin kind of makes me go, ooh, where are you going to bring me? Where are you going to bring me? There's this like shadowy kind of, it's so funny. Some people are like, I love mushrooms. It always brings me to these beautiful light places. Mushrooms have been incredible teachers, but pretty much they have been my shadowy teachers. They take me to, I can see why you said like creepy crawlers or snakes. It doesn't bring me there, but there is this like, ooh, I don't know if I want to go there aspect to them. Um, so, what would you say you learned the most about yourself in writing the book?
I don't think I knew who I was before I wrote the book. I think I saw myself as a reflection of what other people thought about me. So if you thought that I was smart, then I was like, oh, well, I must be smart. And if you were my student and you said, oh, that class was really inspiring, you're such an inspiration, then I thought, oh, like I'm a role model. But it was a borrowed perception and it was a borrowed identity from what other people said and the bad things too. So if someone said to me, you're jealous or you're insecure or you're bossy or like whatever, then I also just acquired those and I sort of cobbled them together like puzzle pieces. And I was like, oh, this is who I am. This is what people say that I am. So this is who I am. And when I wrote the book, I was like, oh, this is who I am. Like the book gave me myself. And I knew who I was when I was done writing the book. And now I'm unwavering in that knowing. And in that knowing, my boundaries are clearer, my expectations are clearer. Everything is clearer because I'm clear about who I am. So I don't need to play these games to get you to think something about me because I want that to be part of my identity because I just know who I am.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like the reflection of oneself from the inside out, not the outside in. It's another beautiful lesson that I think that many people on this path, it's what they come to. It's like a deeper sense of knowing of themselves, which then does end up being like stronger boundaries, clearer ideas, and that can really change a lot of things. Those different boundaries, you may be in relationships for years, those transactional relationships where suddenly those boundaries get much more clear. That's like the nitty gritty of this work. This idea of like, oh, I took earth medicines and they were beautiful and they were mystical. And yeah, there were these shadow aspects and oh, shadow work. Oh, I did that. Check that off the list. It's the integration process that, besides the deeper knowing of self, it's the nitty gritty of then what it brings into your life, how it shifts your life based on who you now are and what you know about yourself. I know you said that you grew up Catholic, and I'm curious because I ask this sometimes. I've noticed that sometimes a psychedelic philosophy comes out of doing earth medicine and psychedelic work. We're obviously learning from the plants, we're learning from the indigenous. Would you say that your philosophy about what spirit is, about who you are, changed after using earth medicines? Did your faith tradition that you said was Catholic, did that change?
I've always been really connected. I've always talked to God and I've always talked to Source and I've always been really connected. I think the journey has cleared away more of the weeds and more of the noise and all the things that weren't God. And that source and that energy, it's just more accessible, more present, and it's just I just have a stronger relationship. And I think that's what a lot, for me, that's what a lot of the healing work is, because for me, a lot of the trauma and the wounds is collecting false ideas and collecting borrowed shame and baggage and stuff that blinds us from just seeing the magnificence of ourselves and everything else, right? And so much of the healing for me is about purging all of that and having a lot more space to admire the magnificence of everything.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for being here today. I haven't completed your book, but you've really inspired me in this conversation to dive into it even more deeply. You come with such an incredible wealth of knowledge, and I love your sense of humor and your lightheartedness and your beauty and all that you're sharing about what you've learned out in the field with your feet in the dirt, pulling food from the ground and going deep into your healing work. Is there anything else alive for you that you would want one of our listeners to know?
Please, connect if you resonate with this conversation. We are in community. I'm building community. Please be connected. Don't hesitate to leave comments or messages or reach out. I think we're co-creating all of this together, and I think everyone should be participating in the conversation and joining in the fun. Honor where you are. Honor where you are. Everything is unfolding the way that it should, and that's not going to be comforting if you're in the dark night part, because all you want in the dark night part is for that part to be over. But just honor it as best as you can. Take care of yourself as best you can. Be as kind as you can to yourself. And stay connected to people like us who have gone through it and come out the other side and can help support and guide you.
Well, thank you for being here. I will put your book and how people can purchase that in the show notes and the ways that people can reach out to you. And let's stay in touch as psychedelic women on this journey of uncovering the truth of who we are and delicately walking this path in a hopefully right relationship. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for this beautiful podcast and everything that you're doing in the world.